Alright, yeah, it's been a crazy and busy trade deadline. This video is accurate as of 3 p.m. when the trade deadline ended, so unless other news comes out that absolutely knocks my socks off, it's not in here. This video does adjust on the fly a little bit. Some deals for the same teams happened after I had already talked about them, so I didn't cover every single little trade, I just covered the ones that I thought were significant for one reason or another. Enjoy. Anthony Davis is on the move again. Wow. Okay, so the Mavs basically sent AD and a bunch of guards they aren't using in exchange for an expiring in Chris Middleton, some younger guys, and picks. Now, as far as this concerns the Dallas Mavericks, this is simply just trying to reset things so they can start building for the Cooper Flag timeline. That's basically it. One way to look at it is they turn Luka Doncic into insert a bunch of players everybody's gonna laugh at. Really, this is more about just resetting things, like whenever they decide to move Kyrie. We all know that was a very bad decision last year. It resulted in them getting Coop somehow. But yes, banking an era on Kyrie and AD was hilarious. AD is hurt at the time of this trade. Kyrie has not returned. There's no word if he will return. Doesn't seem like he'll be moved before the deadline, so that'll probably be over summer. And then with that, they can just fully start to build this team around their new guy. And they finally found a team who it made sense to take Anthony Davis. We had been talking about AD a good bit on my second channel because I thought some teams who it was actually a crazy idea for them to be interested in AD. They kept popping up in reports. And it basically boiled down to, if you're a contending team or you're a young team and you start depending on AD, you just don't need to do this deal. The history, we have too many receipts. Thing with Washington is, okay, you just went and got Trae Young. You add Anthony Davis. Yes, they're still a young, bad team right now, but the structure for Washington is kind of there. They've got impressive young guys in Trey Johnson, a player I have high hopes in terms of creation for with Keyshawn George, and then Alex Zar. These are all guys who are going to get better. They will benefit from playing with Trae, and now you've built the defensive backline for Trae should everybody stay healthy. That being said, expecting AD to stay healthy for long periods of time is insane. I wouldn't bet on it happening, and if it doesn't, well, he turns into an expiring contract in 2028. I have no reason to believe he's going to turn down $62 million. And if the injury problems persist, he probably won't see an extension. So for the Wizards, worst come to worst, you kind of make it to the end of this and you still have young developing guys. And then AD, who you can offload in the season after next. At the same time, this looks good on paper to start next season with compared to where the Wizards were years ago when they for some reason extended Bradley Beal. Turning the ship around to be where you are today, I just consider it all a win. And if Trae and AD are healthy and exciting and help this team win more, cool. If not, like I said, they've got a young structure there. I don't think we'll see either of these players this year, as they should be wanting to be as bad as possible for the best chance at getting a high pick. And so that's something else. Yeah, just look, nobody goes to Washington. I don't remember the last star free agent they signed. Trae Young was a guy who had them on his list because he believes he can get an extension there. There weren't a lot of other teams where that situation lined up. So that's the type of things, again, like some other teams we've discussed or will discuss, you've got to make moves sometimes that other franchises wouldn't dare touch. If you were the Detroit Pistons, I have no clue why Anthony Davis was ever a thought. If you're the Wizards, for the reasons I just explained, I get it. And most importantly, you did this without really giving up much value. And for that reason, I'm going to give a B+ to Washington here. B+ because I'm almost certain we're going to be back here in a year talking about, oh, if AD was playing, we have too many samples at this point. So B+ is as high as I can go. For the entire era though, in like the last 4 years, I would say, or just since they started correcting this all, it's a big A+. And yeah, once again, Dallas getting an expiring and picks, maybe some value out of a guy like AJ Johnson down the road, cleaning up Nico's mess. This is about as good as it was going to get. There wasn't a lot of teams out there where it would have ever made sense to do something serious in trading for AD. So they're right around the same range. I think both teams got what they wanted here. Well, if you were watching the Los Angeles Clippers turn their season around, it probably came as news to you that James Harden was all of a sudden due to be traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it happened kind of as quickly as they said it would. Surprisingly, the deal kind of makes a ton of sense for both teams though. If you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, I think people underrate how quickly a star situation deteriorates. And taking a look at Donovan Mitchell's contract, you notice he has a player option for 2028, which really means 2027 is kind of the year where, whether it's on purpose or not, players, and stars particularly, kind of take the screws to their front office. The Cavaliers keep going through these playoff runs injured. Even if they haven't been injured, they typically haven't been good enough. And last year was conceivably their peak. The roster got worse. They lost Ty Jerome. That was a huge component to their scoring. And if you've paid attention to them this year, when Donovan Mitchell does not score 30 or more, they are basically a 500 team. That is the mark of a sinking ship for what is supposed to be a contending team, especially in this Eastern Conference. Another issue, aside from when his contract decision is coming up, is that his quote-unquote co-star, Darius Garland, has been dealing with that toe that's falling off the bone since last playoffs. It's affected him this year. He hasn't played too many games. And even at full health, Garland, he was a big defensive liability. It's very tough to get around that small guard issue for contending teams. It just is. So for the price of this small guard who is now just flat out injury prone, and a second round pick, you take back James Harden. He is currently averaging his highest points per game since 2020. Still gives you 8 assists, still a great engine to an offense. For a team like the Cavaliers who kinda don't have a ton of options, with this situation becoming available, it just made sense. You get a guy who can create his own shot next to Donovan Mitchell, a player who can really revamp your offense. He's got 2 bigs to play with. If you just watch that tandem with he and Zubac, that was beautiful. And quiet as kept, you're looking at a team that could still finish second by the end of this year in the East. You haven't heard much about them. They've been injured. As of late, they've been playing better. And yeah, it's not an incredibly large gap to close here. You could still end up with it looking like the Knicks and Cavs were at the level they're supposed to be, or we thought they were supposed to be when we came into this season. And if you are a contending team in the East, this year, you put your hat in the ring and you might get out. It's not a knock on the Pistons. It's not even a knock on the East. There just isn't teams here that believe that they could get out of the East where somebody is head and shoulders above them, I don't think. On the Clippers side, I actually was floating the idea of a rebuild for them when they lost to Denver last year. It seemed they potentially had a run in them, it ended, and you took one good look to realize their 2 stars are old. One of them, you never really know when he's going to be injured and out for a long time or when he's going to be dominating. Even in the best case scenario, this is not a championship team. But because they don't have a pick that they actually control until next decade, they doubled down on it over the offseason. They got even older. That entire project basically got cleared out. They were on an uptick here, giving some of the younger guys a shot, and then Kawhi putting his body back together. It's just incredible he keeps doing that. But regardless, the Clippers are not winning a championship this year. And in reality, they really do have to kind of start figuring out the next era. So Harden with his player option coming up next year, yeah, okay, you can extend him, let him keep getting older, keep doing this back and forth thing with Kawhi Leonard, and once you get to the end of the line, that's just kind of it. In this scenario, you get a younger player. He is good when he plays, but also as they continue to head towards this reset, by 28, he'll be $44 million expiring. Hell, Kawhi Leonard next year presumably will be $50 million expiring. I'm not sure what else was really on the table for James Harden, or if anything else was on the table. All I do know for the Clippers is that they need to head towards a reset. And it's possible. We've watched multiple teams this decade have no picks. They look like a dead-end situation. All of a sudden, they have 7. It is unfortunate. The optics of it are not good for James, as he's exited basically every team for one reason or another in the last 5, 6, 7 years. But Harden is absolutely in a better situation to get out of his conference now, and the Clippers are presumably in a better situation to start undoing this and building a future. It's going to take some time. This by itself doesn't do it. Garland and a second round pick is not a massive return, but who knows? You don't know how Father Time works. You don't know how injuries work. You don't know what Harden or Leonard would be worth a year or 2 from now. So I'm giving the Cavaliers an A for this move. You do not just let the clock run out on your star player so he can put you in the situation that Milwaukee is kind of in right now. This might have been the best chance they had to do this. And I'll give the Clippers a B. We don't know if Darius Garland is going to play much the rest of this year and help them continue to turn their season around. They did the right thing, but obviously it kind of sucks if you're a Clipper fan, probably. You might have hoped their return would be higher. And oh, hold the phone, because the Clippers are at it again. Here we go. Now this makes a little bit more sense to me, and oh my goodness, the Pacers just landed Ivica Zubac. It gets crazier. It's an exchange for Benedict Mathurin, Isaiah Jackson, and 2 first-round picks and 1 second-rounder, but yeah, it's this year's first-rounder. You know the Pacers have been projected very high pretty much the whole year, but they have protected it. It's protected 1 through 4 and 10 through 30. And if it falls outside of that range, it converts to a Pacers 2031 unprotected first. Man, oh man. Okay, wow. I have to wrap my mind around this one really quickly. First of all, Indiana was looking for a big man this year. You've seen Jay Huff get a lot of those minutes, obviously losing Miles Turner last year. That was their center in the NBA Finals. So they've had some time to chew on what exactly to do with that. They'll be healthy and contending again really soon here, but they did need to replace it, and they have, man. We just got done talking about the 2-man game between Harden and Zubac. With a healthy Tyrese, this is going to be amazing. so amazing that I think, considering the context, it was well worth the risk here. I mean, this is some pretty heavy protection. And as we speak at this specific moment, the Pacers continue to be projected top 3. It's been this way for a while. So in the best case scenario, the Pacers have picked up Zubac and in a really stacked draft get to keep the pick and add it to this contending team. Which does beg the question, because I do think Indiana has enough there that adding Zubac right now could get them a couple more wins. The Pacers currently hold the worst record in the East and have one more win than the Kings, but it is a basically 5-way tie. So even a couple of more wins could jeopardize this. I've got to imagine some guys are getting taken out back. They have to. With this deal and shipping Mathurin out, they have also gotten rid of the complication where they have to decide to pay him, extend him, and instead Zubac's contract pretty much lines up perfectly with the rest of this core that is locked up for the next few years. In the event the Pacers don't capitalize on this pick, the Clippers, who need this badly, would get to pick from 5 through 9. And they also take back a young player in Mathurin who they have some time to decide what to do with. This is what I've been mentioning with the Clippers and some teams you've seen around the league getting themselves out of sticky situations. This is the start to that. These are the first couple of moves. They've got a lot of work to do and not a ton of wiggle room. So you've got to get creative, and that's how you end up with this complicated pick being involved. But I was wondering about this with Zubac. He's a good player. He was drawing interest in the market. A really good big, and for what the Pacers needed, wow. One way or the other, they are going to come back on timing next year. I do just want to add on here, regardless, the Clippers are probably about to start going back the other way. They had really rebounded things, but they're essentially just trying to set up their future in the middle of the season. They slide. Oklahoma still does have the pick, which is top 15 at the moment, and depending on how much they slide, whoa, they just but they just subtracted Harden and Zubac. So that was a big thing. Once again, not confident in Darius Garland's health. Don't know what Kawhi makes of all of this now. OKC could still end up with a good pick. We had forgotten about that. The next big deal, and the one that was actually the first of the day to be announced, the Memphis Grizzlies have done it. They have cashed out on Jaren Jackson Jr. You are probably celebrating if you're a Memphis fan. It's Triple J, John Kochar, Landale, and Vince Williams all shipped out to Utah for Walter Clayton Jr., Kyle Anderson, Taylor Hendricks, Niang, and most importantly, 3 future first-round picks. Okay, this one is a little bit more complicated. A little over a year ago, I did a halfway through the 2020s video, and I talked about Memphis specifically and said, do you believe these 3 guys right here are your future? Do you want to pay them like it is? Do you want to continue to try to build on the 2022 plot, which has kind of only gone down since then? They already got a pretty good haul for Desmond Bane. It's not even pretty good. This was a great haul for Bane. And the situation with Jaren Jackson is you were paying him like he is a franchise player, a face of the league type guy, or at least a number 1 on your team who you can build around and he can take you to the finals. And Jaren Jackson Jr. is not that. He's good. He's not that. So you go ahead and clear that gridlock. You've already got young players on this roster you've drafted for the last couple of years, and you add another 3 picks to it for a total of 7 between that trade with Bane. Even sweeter, they created a $28.8 million trade exception with this. Now your last order of business is finding out what to do with Ja Morant. He's making close to or a little more than $40 million for the next few years. He also, at this point, does not appear like he is a franchise point guard. The return is probably not going to be super high for him. He's not a defender. He doesn't shoot it well. He doesn't even do the things that he used to do at a superstar level at that level anymore. But for a full restart, between the other 2, you've already done well. What you get for Ja is kind of what you get for Ja. I don't know if it's going to happen before the trade deadline. Actually, this video is going to drop right as the deadline ends. So if this part is still in here, he did not get traded, which leads me to assume he'll be traded in the offseason. And as a team that probably won't be doing that good for a while, you have got an extensive draft bank. That's either for you or it's capital. I really commend this franchise for starting over at an appropriate time. We have examples of franchises today who should have already started over. We kind of already went over one, but they hang on until they just kind of have to take whatever they can. I can think of another franchise that probably needs to make this decision sooner than later. But yes, this iteration failed. They cleared it out. A+ for Memphis, seriously. So then this trade evoked a few reactions immediately, specifically for Utah and why you would trade this many picks for a guy like Jaren Jackson. And with the money he's making, and being where you are today, his team has been perpetually losing for a while now, but you've essentially made a move that a contending team probably makes. Okay, well, a couple of realities here. Great players don't typically go to the Utah Jazz. Their last era was Mitch and Gobert, which was drafted. Their last notable era before that, Darren Williams and Boozer. Darren was drafted. Boozer had something really weird happen with Cleveland, restricted free agency, and got to Utah, he got paid. Long story short, don't have to do a retrospective here. This team does not typically draw the interest from stars to trade for them and keep them happy, or just get blessed. It doesn't happen. And so if you've paid any attention to Utah, they've got some nice young pieces. You look at Keontae George's potential. If you've heard of nobody else here, you've known of Walker Kessler, and you're hoping Ace Bailey reaches his potential. So between the guys I just named and then having Lauri Markkanen, who was paid until the end of the decade, and now adding Jaren Jackson, who is a defender, and if you're actually trying to build this team, you know they need defense badly. As management, you probably feel like you can maybe build something interesting going forward. Now, getting Jaren and knowing he's not a number one, and I'm going to assume management has paid attention and knows this, I feel like the Lauri Markkanen trade talks probably end. He's been in them for the last couple of years. We always assumed the Jazz would probably cash out on that. No, this signals a different direction. As of right now, even with the complicated swap rules, Utah is projected to get a top 10 pick. I don't think getting Jaren Jackson on this team right now kind of messes things up. Obviously, you're worried you may win a few more games, but their place in the standings, they're down there, man. They're a good amount of games behind Dallas at this point in the season, and I don't know if I would count on being able to lose enough to be worse than the Pelicans or even drop further, because then you have the Kings all the way down there. They're probably going to finish around where they are one way or the other. So you'll presumably come back next year with a pretty decent roster and maybe be back on track to try to compete again. And this is the reality of certain franchises. When you are a desperate franchise, you have to make desperate moves sometimes. The headline doesn't look great. It boils down to 3 first-rounders for Jaren Jackson. It doesn't look great, but if you're the Jazz, you could keep losing for a little longer until you basically have to trade Lauri Markkanen for more picks. Or you could start trying to use what you have here and trend it towards a competing direction. But it is a desperate move nonetheless, so I am going to give it a C. Just because it's something I feel like they kind of needed to do doesn't mean it's a great situation, but they're not in a great situation being in Utah regardless. I mean, did you see this dumbass shit? Like next. And once again, at a trade deadline, the Celtics were active. If you knew Anthony Simons' contract, you saw that he was really always under evaluation. Before choosing to deal with him further, it was always a question of whether he was going to be a part of the Celtics' future once Jason Tatum came back. And the way things worked out this season, Boston has been able to float around the top of the conference as is. By that, I mean they are having a great season based off of their perimeter talent and having some budget bigs. Also, if you've watched them, you've seen they can play with any of these teams so far. Even losing the season series to Detroit, a lot of those games were ultra competitive, and that's just with Jaylen Brown. They've made it sound like Jason Tatum was going to return all year. I think that's still up in the air. But assuming that he did, which would mean he had a reason to believe he could actually play and contribute, it's simply not out of the question of Boston going to the finals this year. Now, one thing that would definitely jeopardize that was their big man rotation. Luka Garza is trying, and Nehemias Queta has improved for sure. If you think you can make a run, your front line still needs to be better than that. And with sending Anthony Simons and a second-round pick to Chicago for Vooch in a second-rounder, they accomplish it. You have enough perimeter talent, especially if Tatum does come back. What you would need is a bit more skilled of a big than you had, and a guy at that position who can stretch the floor who is not Luka Garza. Once again, he's trying, it's not on crazy volume, and he's not a good defender. Vooch is not a good defender either, but for the way he expands your offense, the trade-off is worth it. Now, as your main 2 bigs, you can go with having Queta for defense and rolling, and then Vooch for a lot more offensive versatility. One of the reasons the Celtics have survived this year, aside from just how good Jaylen Brown is they've been able to keep lineups around him that make sense. Vucevic helps them with that even further. Oh, but he helps them with a lot more, while being able to give them a puncher's chance to get out of the East this year, which is actually, again, a little bit more than a puncher's chance. He's expiring. This is the last year on his deal, so whatever happens, happens. I don't know if he'll be a part of the future, but for right now, he kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone in that way. With this deal, their tax bill dropped from $39 million to $17. Remember how much we were talking about the money with the Celtics core that won the championship? Bobby Marks posted this graphic. On June 15th, the projected salary and luxury tax came out to $540 million. Today, it's $211. Mind you, while they are second in the Eastern Conference, or fighting for it at least. One thing you've always heard about Boston is these old titles and this and that, and they won in the Stone Ages, whatever, but one thing has been consistent throughout their history. They have made A+ moves in the front office. They just have. Almost their entire history. That's why they've been so good. This deal made tons of sense for them, whether they get out of the East this year, whether Vucevic last pass this year. This is an A+ move for where this team is today. Now, Chicago, I'm going to give this one a B, and here's why. Although Vooch should have been gone, he was a part of that 2021 go for it move that never worked out because of injury. Yeah, they should have blown that entire thing to smithereens way earlier than they did. Having to get to the end and just settle for Anthony on an expiring, it's a little disappointing, but they do indeed own their pick this year. They have one from Portland that's protected 1 through 14, but they have their own. I'm gonna say without Vooch, they have a chance to drop some here. They've already been dealing with injuries. Here goes one of your better players. Charlotte is on the uptick. I think they're just flat out gonna be in the play-in this year. They're gonna, as long as health permits, they're gonna keep moving up. And again, this video is recorded before the deadline. I'm assuming at this point, the Bucks are not getting rid of Giannis, but either way, this season is just not going good for them. So it might be difficult to fall further than that, but maybe not. If Giannis hasn't been traded and he comes back, they will probably win a few more games, but then 12th is about as low as you can drop. Either way, this does provide a shot at their pick being a bit better. You clear a little bit more salary in the offseason. We'll see where it goes from there. I'm not too trusting of Chicago's front office, but for now, I can see where it might go. Also, just one more note on this trade. Long story short, the way the deal was done, the Celtics, and I would assume they would use it this season, can bring in one more guy for a potential playoff run. Technically, it's valid for another year, but because of the amount of money, I would assume it's for somebody off waivers. Keep an eye out on that. This one may have went a little under the radar. But the Bulls have also shipped Kevin Huerter and Dario Saric to the Pistons. Jaden Ivey from Detroit and Conley from Minnesota are going back to the Bulls. Minnesota basically gets salary relief, and Detroit is also getting a 26 first-round protected swap from Minnie. Okay, if this part makes it into the video, it means Minnesota did not get Giannis. Either way, it was time for Conley to go. Chicago gets a young player with Ivey who they can experiment with for a bit, and Detroit absolutely needed more shooters. If you've paid attention to them this year, if you've been seeing them in the first seed and they made you curious enough to lock in, you immediately realize that in a playoff setting, yes, they need more shooters. Their series could essentially come down to, hey, were Duncan Robinson and Tobias Harris off? Because if they were, the floor begins to shrink very quickly. Cade and Jaren need as much space as possible. You give yourself even more lineups to play with on a team that was already pretty versatile. I think in some of those lineups throughout the year, you've looked and said, hey, in the postseason, we're still just going to shrink the floor here. We'd rather Javonte Green and company shoot than Cade Cunningham just get to where he's trying to go. Yeah, they needed this. I like their chances a lot more than I did when I woke up. Ivy is obviously returning from injury, didn't get the start this year. Roles shifted, production has dropped, and opportunity has dropped as well. But he is still very young. And before the injury, I saw the potential. So Chicago can chew on this for a bit. Meanwhile, for Detroit, yeah, he was just 100% a guy who, or another guy who a playoff team would consider as streaky and test a little bit. I think for how they played, they got better here. Especially because for the role Ivy was playing, I think you just get this from Dennis Jenkins anyways. A guy who may or may not come in and be a spark plug. Not a ton of variation in their three-point shooting. Yeah, A+ for Detroit here, man. I was worried they weren't going to make a move. Once again, Chicago, Huerter was one of your better players. Now, the one thing you might look at with this move and say is, hey, Huerter this season is 31% from three. But it's hard to explain, right? It's on 5 attempts, so this kind of is his thing. And we know historically he shoots a lot better than that. And so since 2019, he's actually been 36% or better. Even in the 26 games for Chicago last year, when he got traded there, he was shooting 37. This is an outlier. I think he's going to get better quality shots on Detroit. But more importantly to the Pistons, again, it's by reputation. So for instance, Chris Dunn shoots a higher percentage from 3 right now. Chris Dunn will still be left open in the postseason. If he hits 5-6 threes, teams just have to choose that and die with that versus not paying attention to a star or enough attention to a star because of it. Again, I think the percentage on Detroit will take a jump, but either way, that's still not a guy that you leave open. That's not a guy coaches game plan for typically and leave open. This is postseason space. So for that reason, I'm still giving the Pistons an A. Time will tell, but watching them closely this year, I believe they made the right move. Again, for Minnesota, you were essentially just clearing Mike Conley's salary. Time is up. And forget the rest of what I had to say here because both teams have made more moves. Yeah, Chicago has gone just nuclear. They went ahead and sent Coby White out as well. Mike Conley's salary is getting rerouted. They are both going to the Hornets. That gives us something else to break down. Yes, if you've not been paying attention, because Charlotte has finally hit a clean bill of health, they have been on the rise. The structure for their team is there to build with now. They don't really have to tank anymore. They don't have to keep losing and just keep stacking picks. It's good. What they have right now is good. It just needs to actually be able to play consistently. And while they're on this hot streak, and it has, and it's really looking like they're going to at minimum make the play-in, and I think they would be one of the better teams in the play-in, they are picking up Coby White. I love the move. The main point, aside from any other picks or players here, is they sent out Collin Sexton, who was having a solid year, but they saw a chance for an upgrade and they got it. This gives them more creation options, more shooting, and more lineup versatility. I love it. This Eastern Conference, it doesn't have a powerhouse right now. You don't know when the next one is coming, so any team that is young and has something to build on very much should be aggressive right now. That is what Charlotte has done. Chicago looks stacked with guards, but there's so many expirings here, including Collin Sexton they just got, and they still weren't done. They went in and traded Dosunmu to the Minnesota Timberwolves. They take back Rob Dillingham, Leonard Miller, and 4 second-round picks. So once again, nuclear. It's very clear the Bulls just want to head into the summer where they're still thinking Giannis might be traded, and those two for some reason have been linked for so long. Either way, Giannis or not, they are definitely probably looking to fall a little bit in the East now. Actually, not that I think, they just won't be in the play-in now. Then you pick up some new talent in the draft, and you have cap space. Took them long enough to blow shit up. For the Timberwolves, I like this. Again, the Giannis sweepstakes seems over for now. They have been looking for some answers at guard. The last few years, Mike Conley was able to handle that. He has gotten older. They've kind of just been managing, and Rob Dillingham was part of that. They started giving him a chance and actually vouched for him. But with Dosunmu, you 100% give yourself a shot at fixing one of their main issues, and it's simply how this team is built around Ant. He gets blitzed at a very high rate. The Wolves continue to win games because they are talented and they have defense, but in terms of fit and getting them to the next tier, there's work to be done. This is part of the work. Another guard who can handle some creation and is currently giving you 45% from 3-on-4 attempts. That makes him a top shooter on the Timberwolves. They desperately needed this in the backcourt with Ant, and they really didn't pay much for it. You don't know what or when Rob Dillingham is really going to hit his stride, if he does. And in any case, for what they need right now, this is what they need more right now. A+ for Minnesota. And again, I like Chicago's direction, and I would have liked it more 2 or 3 years ago. Going into full teardown mode, and you've got Vucevic and Giddey to keep going with already as part of a young core. We'll see where it goes from here. And there it is. The Golden State Warriors finally got active. After having their deal turned down for Giannis, they went ahead and got a second rounder and some salary relief from trading Trayce Jackson-Davis, and finally solved the Kuminga situation. Yes, he and Buddy Hield are headed out to the Hawks for Kristaps Porzingis. Now, I have seen the most confusing reaction from every direction. Maybe my algorithm is just fried, but every mention of Porzingis I've seen is, why did they do this? Oh, this is such a drop off from Giannis. This is what we waited so long for. Even Sham's tweet talks about how they've looked at him and they've landed a floor spacing big man. Okay, the story with Porzingis, so we're all aware, is he's a $30 million expiring. That's it. I don't even think the Warriors are really counting on him playing consistently. Seriously, he's run into some problems in the last year. We really don't know how much longer he's going to be around in the league at the rate that it's going. So if by some miracle he plays consistently and plays into the playoffs, as the Warriors do appear they will stick around the play-in, cool. Yeah, he absolutely fits. He would make them better, but Golden State at this point in time is just trying to survive and maybe get to higher ground for the end of the Steph era. The Jimmy Butler ACL killed them. That was their move to save the Steph era. It might have had some juice last year. This year it was a little more average. With the injury, he's essentially just an expiring contract going into next season. They never had that much liquidity on this roster. There's not a ton of assets here you can really flip for anything. The best chance they had was to use those picks and try to get Giannis. It did not work. So they're starting to look at how we start over, and how you start over is clearing some of their salary, which they just did with this move, and which they will do by more than likely letting Porzingis walk this summer unless his career just completely turns around, unless his health completely turns around. So they'll have picks for the future, cap space to maybe be able to do something over summer, but totally confused why we're getting new look Warriors graphics. And what do we think about this team? What I think about this team is we might not really see this lineup on the floor together a lot. That being said, Golden State in this weird Kuminga situation could have been resolved a lot longer ago. His value is what took this trade so long to even happen. They probably wanted more at some points, but because of how these last couple of years have gone, market isn't too wild. But we know that he does have potential, and that's why I like this for ATL. Instead of just letting that salary come off the books, you flip it into Kuminga, who might be a part of your build, him being athletic, his build overall kind of fits with what is on this roster, the direction they were kind of going, which told you they were moving away from Trey. So you have some time to play with that and see if it works for the future. And you had Buddy Hield, who is just a streaky three-point shooter. You know, in theory, he's supposed to be one of the better ones. I mean, even with how streaky he is, last season you get nearly 7 attempts and 37% for Atlanta, and where they are right now, that helps. Hasn't been that way this year. And the Hawks are kind of playing with house money. If you're not aware of their draft situation, the way it's currently going, they are going to benefit off that Pelicans pick. They're going to get a really nice selection in the draft. They've already dumped Trey. Whether they make the playoffs this year and get some experience with the Jalen Johnson core or just fall out is kind of irrelevant. So this is an experimentation time. That's the reason CJ was brought in as an expiring in that deal. He can help them score, and maybe they make it, maybe they don't. It's all about the future for them right now. You flipped your expiring into potential. I've got an A for ATL here. For Golden State, man, just C minus. Again, if you hadn't waited this long, the return could have been better than an expiring. Even when that does come off, I'm just a little bit confused on what the plan is for the rest of the timeline, because at this point it's moving on. Draymond was damn near giving his obituary in Golden State when he thought he was out of here the other day. Nonetheless, just so you know, you don't have to judge this as if it was an actual roster move. Not for the Warriors. And further involving Atlanta, they have also gotten off of Luke Kennard, who was an expiring. And yeah, you guessed it. If you were paying attention the other day and you saw this look, you knew what time it was. LA found a way to get rid of Gabe Vincent. They also had to send a 2032 second round pick, but big thing here for Atlanta is they created an $11 million trade exception, while Gabe will also expire. Big deal for the Lakers, and you know, if you've been on the second channel in the last few weeks, they got another shooter who will also expire as they move on from the LeBron era. Right now, while you have to have Braun, Luke is shooting nearly 50% from three. Now, it's only 3 attempts, but this is kind of his thing that he's known for. A couple of years back, he was shooting 45 on 6. Playing on this LA team, he is going to be needed. Big issues for them have been versatility, the fact that they kind of either have to have defense or shooting on the floor, and then sometimes that shooting wasn't even really shooting. With Luke, you hope you get a guy who can at least fill the shooting part. Having LeBron and Luka out there to be with Austin Reeves and be terrible defensively, while also not being able to create the necessary space all the time, this does help them. I don't think it's a crazy needle mover, but they will be in the playoffs. Just based off on who they have, they will have some expectations to not just get cooked. And so by default, this made them better. Turning Gabe and a pick into an expiring shooter you needed, and who you also won't have to commit to for long if you don't want to, that's an A. For the Hawks, more salary going out, trade exception, also A. Jared McCain's deal was interesting. We were on stream and I was pointing out OKC really probably does need to make a deal this year. It comes in the form of Jared McCain, who there's very little sample on. He's been hurt most of his career at this point, which just spans back to last season. But for those 23-ish games he played, he looked good. We know he's a young guy that can shoot, potentially create, and the Thunder need as much shooting as they can get. They're very mid at that right now. We saw in the playoffs last year, the floor kind of shrink up a little bit, and they had a much tougher time getting through the postseason than they did the regular season. And this year, it's even worse. Some of those guys that were being played off of in the postseason last year, their percentages have come down even further. So McCain is going to slot in. He's probably going to get some more minutes right away because SGA is going to be out presumably until after the All-Star break. And assuming this is their final deal here, I really did think they might have gone a little bit bigger than this. It's hard to know where McCain is at right now because playing on Philly, that guard rotation was jammed. It's part of the reason the Sixers went ahead and did this. And on top of that, they got the Rockets first rounder this year and 3 second picks. Per Shams, it also allows them to convert Dominic Barlow, which they just need to do at this point. So for those reasons, I get it, and I'm kind of wondering if they wanted to do this early, or was it kind of out of necessity for reasons like that, because it just does feel early to be trading McCain. I don't know what's going to happen with Quentin Grimes, who's expiring, and you've got Maxey and Edgecombe. That's awesome, but it really feels like with a little more time, maybe McCain would have been able to contribute to this. And with the potential he showed for him to go for these picks, I am kind of questioning it a little bit. But like I said, assets and getting to convert Barlow, who is just flat out more important to the team right now than McCain is, I do get it. And for OKC, I guess I was just hoping that, like I said, they got a little bit more. But at the end of the day, you did this at almost no cost. And watching them this year, And knowing what happened last year, I really do think they needed another body. I think I was hoping for more of an upgrade at the wing. And knowing OKC's rotation, once they're healthy and AJ Mitchell's there, Caruso, I do kind of wonder if McCain is going to be able to really fit at that point. He's got a trial period here. And starting with Philly, I'm gonna go C-, man. I can't judge it too hard. McCain, again, very small sample size, but damn, this was early and it wasn't really a return. It felt like they thought they just needed to do it. And for OKC to potentially pick up a guy who, if he hits some of that potential, he's just another young player, gives them even more flexibility than they already have roster-wise, potentially fills a need right now, especially when we've seen them this season in some tough games with teams they're going to have to beat in the playoffs. It's hard not to look at this as an A. They just won the championship, and it feels like they picked up a potentially really talented player for free. Okay, so the New York Knicks got active late, and with the information we found out, it sounds like it was out of necessity. So, not mentioned in this video so far, they did go ahead and drop off Yabusele. You remember a video I made earlier in the year? I think it was listed as their biggest regret, where they just hadn't really found a role for him on the Bleacher Report article. And then from that deal, rerouted Dalen Terry and 2 second-round picks with cash to the Pelicans for Jose Alvarado. Now, I think this functions two really good ways for them. One, even when fully healthy, if you've been watching, you do know sometimes you get some Tyler Kolek minutes. That's usually around the time opposing teams don't hesitate to try to go at him, really on both sides of the ball. He can score, but they will press him. And then on defense, he is one of the players on New York where teams will try to go at him and bend the defense. So you give yourself another option and even more versatility with Jose. Decent three-point shooter, hustles on both sides of the ball. It was a good move in that way regardless, as you would just be able to run another guard in situations where Kolek wasn't really favorable. But now Deuce McBride is apparently due to be sidelined until the playoffs. That is huge. Playing him in lineups with Brunson, having him as an overall secondary creator. He bails them out of possessions at times. Yeah, for how good the Knicks have been as of late, and just for overall how they function, oh, that's a big loss. And that means Alvarado will get even more opportunity. Before the Knicks hit this streak, one of my biggest concerns was their defense. It was how they keep Brunson out of matchups when teams really try to go at him. They had already improved their effort on that side regardless, including Jalen. But having a guy like Alvarado around will make that even easier. So fully healthy, I really like what they've done. Again, they've got themselves back near the top of the Eastern Conference. They were expected to be the team benefiting most from all these injuries coming into the year, and finishing up, yeah, you mix the way they play and the deal they've made here. If they can be healthy by the time the playoffs come around, I like them. And you did this, I don't think, giving up too much value. They've been trying out other bigs on the roster anyways. It's not like Yabusele wasn't expendable. So especially because of the timing, I've got an A for the Knicks here. I don't really know how I feel about it for the Pelicans. A few years back when it looked like they were going to be on the rise in the West, he appeared to be a big part of that. Obviously, they have rarely ever been healthy since. You definitely didn't get a better player, but you did get an expiring. They'd have to make a qualifying offer for next year, and if they don't, they cleared a little salary. Jose was on a player option, so he was either going to pick that up for next year or there would be extension talk. Other than that, I feel very meh about it for them. So like just C range, and also not really encouraged because I hear the things that the front office is thinking and I don't really get it. If anything, this team should probably be more active. Which they still have a couple of hours to do at the time of this recording, but if this makes it in, that means they didn't, and I'm still confused. And that does it. That was the 2026 trade deadline. It was insane. For some of these, we've actually been talking about them over on my second channel for a while. I try to keep the smaller topics over there. I did feel like the trade deadline as a whole rose to the need of an actual main channel video. So if you enjoyed, hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Let me know who you thought the winners and losers were, and hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications every time a new video drops. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.